Hello and welcome back again to a deep dive on all the Bach sonatas and partitas. My name is Stephen Song, and today I'll be talking about the fugue from the first violin sonata in G minor. Of course, famously, Bach wrote 3 fugues for the violin, one in each solo violin sonata. And he really showed off his fugue writing chops because he wrote one of the longest fugues in the third violin sonata, and we'll get to that in a couple more later episodes. So this G minor fugue, I think, is probably one of the most richest ones, actually. C major fugue is extremely long, and there's long passages of lots of things going on, but this one is probably the most dense. It's the shortest one. It's about 5 minutes, but it really packs a punch. And the theme is probably the shortest one out of all of them. It's literally a 1-bar motif. I think this whole sonata is in G minor, so it's all kind of more dense, I would say. G minor is a very heavy and rich key. I don't know how to best describe it, but it's like eating a thick pasta or something that's very rich. I find that A minor is somewhat lighter. It's a somewhat more transparent color. And C major, of course, is very pure. I mean, it's the purest key, no sharps, no flats. The other sonatas, B minor, I think is a more tragic key, actually. So that whole sonata just has that, partita has that vibe to it. The D minor partita is, of course, famous for the chaconne, and it has, a very heroic sort of feeling to it. And D minor is, I think, a very powerful key. And then, of course, E major is probably the brightest key out of all the Bach sonatas, and it is extremely dance-like and very fun and happy. So if we look at all 6 of these sonatas and we see the different keys, the reason why I spent so much time talking about it is because I feel that the way you approach this fugue in particular can be more rich, and you can really dig quite deep into these chords. So starting off, a 1-bar melody. Can be quite simple. The way I was taught was playing it more at the tip and a little bit slower. Something like that. And that is more old-fashioned if you watch Heinrich Schering play. He plays it very much at the tip and everything kind of slow and more on the string. And yeah, that would bring out more of this dense feeling, but I currently play it more off the string. And so this is a good topic that we could talk about, whether or not you want to play it on the string or off the string, right? And of course, when there's lots of chords, it has to be on the string, but is your general approach more on or off? And I think that I sort of strike a balance where there are parts that are more on, but I don't want it to become too much on the string. When we get to the 16th notes, Heinrich Schering would play it huge and robust, and I'm not quite there. For this section, I like to play still sort of light. And if you imagine the string, I like to dig in and out like an arc, more for each note. The Schering way, the more robust, romantic way, if you were playing this part in the Brahms Concerto, this is the string. You're essentially going very much in the string. You're digging deeper, and you're not really releasing at all between each note. And that's the sort of détaché that we were taught, right? Just sort of only using the forearm, this very, I guess, boxy stroke. And that's a beautiful stroke for many things. And we will use that when we get to the presto. But still, in this fugue, I still like to have a little bit of lightness to it, despite me saying it's very rich. So, of course, in fugues, we want to find the fugal subject, right? So it's very obvious in the first bar. Starts with on the A string. And then it develops into harmony. So this is a very perfect beginning to a fugue because it starts with one voice, adds one, and then goes to three voices. So let's first tackle the main issue when it comes to fugues, and that is the rolling of the chords and how to make them not be crunchy and stand out like a sore thumb. So my main teacher growing up, Gerardo Ribeiro, he talked about how when he played the fugues, he rolled the chords in a specific way. I'll show that to you right now. So what he would do is he would start off with kind of a very light bow pressure, and he would accelerate the bow pressure after a sort of initial soft impact landing. And so this takes a little bit of getting used to, but what this mitigates is this sort of crash landing. And the crash landing is kind of necessary if you're playing three-note chords, right? Because if you want to play all three notes at the same time, you need quite a bit of force, right? Or else you're not going to hit all three strings. So this method of approaching it, of having a light impact but then a quick burst of bow speed, is sort of the best middle ground, where if you attack the bow like I demonstrated before with the sort of attack, you're very limited in terms of your articulation types, right? Because every note is going to sound bum, bum, bum. But then if you use this articulation, you have so much more variety. There are many moments where we will go to the three-note texture and we will use that sort of stroke, but not all the time. And in fact, in the first line, this is probably the best example of where you want this sort of soft attack. So this is not too unsimilar. It's very similar to the start of the first sonata, of the first movement. The sort of soft start on that note. And it also helps you bring out the bass note, right? So if I were to play 2 and 2 only, It's very virtuosic and brilliant, but you lose that baseline note, right? Because you hear the two notes together. And in terms of the articulation, there's a lot of bow pressure and it sounds kind of harsh and intense. And in order to bring out the melody on the top line, it's helpful to use this rolling technique because then you can really bring out the notes that you want to bring out. Okay, so the fourth measure, this is kind of a little quick figure and you just need kind of a quick maneuver to get to that tritone. I struggled with tritones for quite a while actually, because I struggled to get the hand and the finger around. With tritones, of course, it depends on your hand position, but for me, I found that you need this sort of gap in between the first finger and the neck of the violin and really come around with your left hand to reach that tritone. So you're in this sort of normal position and then you gotta quickly come around. There's lots of instances of tritones in this piece. So you run the risk, because there's so many chords, of every articulation sounding too much the same. As I just demonstrated there, I was doing this chord technique, but everyone kind of was the same. So the more you play these fugues, the more you'll start to find variance within them. And any bow stroke, if it's done too much the same, becomes not too interesting. So just playing like one measure out of nowhere, it's a little bit hard for me to really vary the stroke, because if I'm playing from before, it will definitely impact the way I do it. But I would just say the key to approaching this whole movement really is to find variance in the way that you approach these chords. And one quick note about vibrato too. In these chords and in this fugue, because a lot of it are these short gestures, right? These eighth note articulation figures. You want to use what I call a sort of vibrato that isn't really vibrating to hear the oscillation, but it's just to add life to the note, right? There's two types of vibrato, I think. There's one that just adds life. It's not really a super singing vibrato. And then there's the vibrato that's very singing. And of course, in slow passages, you use the very singing vibrato. But here, it's really about adding life. And for these chords, you really need to use sort of an arm vibrato, right? Because you're blocking big chords and there's no way you can really vibrate with just the wrist. I mean, it's possible, but in moving passages, you want to give it a little burst of life with the arm. Another note about vibrato and the bow, you'll notice in the first episode with the Adagio, I didn't talk so much about vibrato. But in Bach, there's a lot of variance, right? You can vibrate certain chords, you can not vibrate certain chords, and you can use more bow speed, and there's just so much variance. And you should, some chords you cannot vibrate, but if you allow the bow to sing, the bow naturally creates inflection, right? And like I talked about in the Musical Soliloquy podcast, there's already natural vibration of the string, right? And the vibrato, of course, adds even more amplification onto that. And it's really nice, but it can be varied throughout. Here, I do this up bowing, but there I did it too off the string. I think that sounded a little too jumpy. I do that as just a way of convenience bowing, but I want it to sound more sort of détaché. But yeah, so be careful there. Just then I missed a chord there. That's a good example of showcasing how the third finger of the left hand is the weakest finger. And so that's very important to be aware of, because you need to put extra attention onto the third finger in chords to make sure that it's really blocked down. And so I would go through this whole fugue and block out each and every single chord and be able to press it down from the air like you're pressing down a chord on the piano. So the reason why the D third finger did not speak there was because I had blocked down the first finger on the 1-3 chord, but I didn't block down the third finger, because the third finger, when you block it down, it might cause your wrist to come out slightly. And so I didn't prepare that. Of course, I played it out of the blue, so, stuff happens when you're playing out of context. But it's also always a good reminder. So that's, again, an example of when I'm practicing this. When something happens like that, it's sometimes a complete fluke, but oftentimes, more often than not, there's probably a hidden reason behind why something's happening every time. And so if I were to deduce why this up here was too high up, it was, which I don't want the articulation, I would say it's because at the end of this B flat, I was in this position. So my elbow was high. And when it's too high, it's possible to be low, but my natural inclination was to be there. So my solution to that problem would be at the end of this bow, I would stay more into the string, because this is kind of a climactic moment, right? Bum, bum, bim, ba, 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 dum, bim, bum. So I would be actually quite into the string, and I'm in this part of the bow, so I don't really want to lift it, right? Of course I can lift, but I wasn't quite in the right part of the bow. So there I just analyzed an issue, and so next time I play it, I'll be careful. So I'll try this passage one more time. There, I didn't have full control of every arc there. Also, I missed the first chord. Probably because my left hand wasn't fully on the string and my right hand was a little bit hasty. With all of these two-note chords, they require a little bit more pressure and awareness to make sure that you hit both strings at the same time. So again, kind of starting out of the blue, it's very easy to not hit both. So it requires so much control over the violin. And I would say it requires a lot of control sort of being higher up on the string and being able to control being above the string rather than of course when I play with a lower elbow, generally I don't have to lift my elbow as high, and I can do more with the rotation of my forearm. But again, I don't play with such a low elbow anymore, so that's not really in conversation for me. But the mechanics are the same. So this is a very nice long 16th note passage, and I guess you could split it up into two big gestures in the beginning. So we start out, that's sort of establishing, then that's one gesture, then that's the other gesture, and here we come down and build up into the final statement of this theme for this section. So here I would like to bring out the top B flat theme, right? Right, so that top theme I want to bring out, but also there's so much, interesting harmony, and it is kind of a climactic section after you built up so long with these 16th notes. So here I can get quite expansive with the bow, and I'm not too afraid to use more pressure. This chord I didn't quite play in tune. The half step was too tight. You're going to have to deal with lots of intonation issues with Bach, right? Because there's so much chords going on. And all you really need to know is that minor chords, you use a slightly wider spacing. So you don't want your half steps to be too close. In a minor 6, you don't want, sounds not quite good. You want further apart. And then for the major chords, you don't want them too far either. Doesn't sound quite good. So again, I would diagnose this issue as the third finger not being strong enough. I think this is a good reminder for me to work on my third finger, because it's on a fifth on the G and D strings, which are the thickest strings, and pressing it down early is very essential for getting that chord really firm there. Okay, so we conclude with the 16th notes. So this is the conclusion to the first statement. And this theme on the E string, I think of piano. It's sort of a restarting of this new section. And yeah, so the bowing here is really a point of contention, because with the old way that I played more towards the tip, I would do it more as it comes, because it's easier to get the nice equal articulation, bum, 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 beam, on the 16ths. The way that I play now, everything's more lifted and light. I can afford to use up-ups on the bowing. So it really depends on kind of what style you're going for, right? If you're more on the string, then I would not do up-ups. But for the way I'm doing it now, I do up-ups. And it keeps the bowing a little bit more unified, and a lot of it is more on down bows, the chords, which is nice. So that's just a consideration that you want to make there. Here, what you want to do is bring out the theme again. And this is in the first line as well, but here you want to play the chord together in the beginning, but then raise your arm to the A string. Even here, really bring out the A string part, so more weight and a more angle towards the A string. Here, there's the fifth again. It's a quick adjustment you need to make. In order to get the fifth in tune. Because fifths in general, the way to play them in tune is you have to move your elbow and your arm. So it needs to be here, and you need to press it down firm enough. And so it's very tricky. It wasn't quite clear. Here, we're sort of building up, right? The line is building up. So are the accompanying notes. Now here, we get to this theme where it's on the D string, but it's a 3-part texture. So there's 2 ways to do this. Actually 3 ways. You can play the bottom note individually and then roll to the top. Which I would say in the new school, that's probably the most correct way. That's probably the most agreed upon way. Because another way would be to go roll up and down, which is probably the hardest. That's tricky. Or you could go roll from the top down. So I think I did either the second or the third growing up. But yeah, nowadays rolling down is not looked fondly upon. I'm not really sure why. People say it sounds bad, but I don't know. I find that it's a cool color because you rarely do it actually. I don't know, it kind of like inverts your expectation a little bit. Maybe it's because we're so used to chords feeling like from the bottom to the top. So when it suddenly you hear this piercing sound up on the top and then you go to the bottom, maybe people don't like that sound. I think just because we're so used to the way chords are normally rolled. But I don't know. I don't think it's an ugly sound. I mean, it's still, sound. So yeah, but I would probably not roll downwards now. There's a spot in the next movement where I would roll down before, but I probably wouldn't do that now. I think Now with the more focus on bringing out the bass line, and I think it's generally a good thing. And by rolling chords differently, you can actually truly bring out the bass line in different ways. So I think we've sort of evolved into that. Here we go to our first 3-note chords back to back to back to back, right? So here, I think I would used to play even more on the string. I would go, I mean, it would essentially be on the string. I still try to do a little bit of the soft starts and quick acceleration. Because I just find it makes it less bum bum, but makes bum 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 beep. It makes it more of this arc. I think in general this articulation, it makes it less of a jagged start. It makes it more smooth. So I would recommend that basically on most of the chords. So just bringing out the melody notes there. D string there, here. Here is on the E string. Here I go to the A string, D string, sorry. Here it's interesting. I would probably A string, then E string. Still E string probably, even though it's a bunch of Fs and the middle A string is the one changing. But we still want to hear, so I probably wouldn't go. Wouldn't make sense. So knowing exactly which notes you're going to bring out will be very important there. I used to do quite a big break here to signify the start of the new theme. But there I just didn't do as much of a break. I think a small break is okay, but obviously if you take a huge pause, it will distort the phrase. Doesn't quite make sense if you're talking rhythmically. Nowadays, with such an obsession about playing, accurately, I would say going on would be the least controversial. Okay, so now we start the theme on the G string. There, I made sure I bring out the theme on the G string. And this is sort of a rebuilding up, right? We just went through lots of dramatic 3-note chords. Imagine like an organ or a full choir singing all together. And this is now back to one voice. Same thing here. Bring out the top voice. A string voice. D string. A. Here I just did an interesting fingering. I used to do 1, 2, 4, and it would have that tritone there. But because I've got a big hand, I can reach the tritone staying on the second finger there. I just reach for the 4. So that for me is less movement. And of course you use the 1 right after. So I think I've just grown accustomed to that. But I didn't used to do that fingering there. Now it's building up in intensity, right? It's finally on the E string now. So my chord approach is I'm not afraid to really dig in and play it, like, kind of really virtuosically like that. So that's my approach. Here we finally get to a two-note figure of sort of a circle of fifths progression. So I would bring that out, and some of them I bring out the bass note. But here I really like to hear the harmony of all the voices together. So I don't know, that sounds a little bit weak to me to I don't know, it sounds like a little bit obsessive about it. I think the main focus is on the top line. So I just play them as naturally as possible. Now I'm coming down, right? Because this figure is coming downwards. So here I do come down. And when I come down, that's when I like to play around with articulation. Because when you do 2 and 2, it just, no matter what you do, it's just going to sound louder. I guess that's a good point to bring up, because whenever you do play 2 strings at the same time, that's actually louder, right? Because it's 2 notes ringing at the same time, so your ear perceives that as louder automatically. So whenever it is soft, I would definitely play around. And I think I just do it naturally. Just not playing 2 strings at the same time, but really being creative. Yeah, this passage is hard for intonation because you've got this tritone here, back to a B pattern. I have these finger patterns, A, B, C, and D actually, but B pattern is low 2. Another tritone there. Another tritone there. So intonation is hard, while of course bringing out the melody. So of course it's this huge gesture of just following natural contour. You can never go wrong with just the natural contour. If it goes up, it should get louder. If it goes down, it should get softer. So phrasing naturally in music, I think, is generally the best way to approach it. Because my bow is so intense there, it doesn't make sense if I, use no vibrato whatsoever. So I do vibrate a little because it is so intense. There. That's a really tricky passage there, because you're in this half-second position, then you're going into first position there. Actually, half position. So that's a really tricky little transition there that you need to get Here, you just need to come around so you're prepared for the tritone. Really come quite around in fourth position to get that in tune there. Okay, so the next section here, where there's two real approaches to it. Actually, I guess maybe three. You could play it 2 and 2. You could do what I did in the beginning. 4/16 notes, all slurred. You could do 2 and 2 there. I guess. Or you could do what I actually did in the beginning, which maybe is the driest sounding, and I would probably recommend the least now. Right? Because we don't really get a sense of the harmony there. Yeah, it's a little dry. So I would recommend one of the three options before. Again, if you're playing it on the lighter side, the entire fugue, I would probably do and yeah, but I think Heinrich Schering must have done something like that. That is just much more virtuosic, and I think it shows off the violin in a cool way. The fact that it can play legato and play so many strings at once, and it can really sound like an organ, you know, so many voices and this real grand church feeling. So I don't know, I would probably do that now, actually. Or I guess you could alternate, start a little softer. Yeah, I don't know. I would probably just stick to one. So just do it a little bit softer if you're just going to do. There I was like half in between, so. Again, if you're doing two strings at once, there's just a floor of dynamic that's already high. It's just impossible to play too soft with only two strings. Intonation-wise, this is hard because you're doing the tritone there, and yeah, there's no real escaping. You just need to, again, keep 2 and 4 very solid. And that goes for, in general, for intonation here. For example, here, for these chords, 1 and 2 stay completely solid. And then here, 2 and 4 stay solid. So just moving the fingers that need to move. But as you can see, I have a very firm bass there. Okay, now the next passage, it's same thing. I guess you could go. I've never done that actually. I've always done this. Actually, I do a 2 then 1 motion. So there, and yeah, I would probably recommend that. Again, this would probably sound too dry. Yeah, so the tradition is to really up to this big climax and sounding like an organ. So I would just do this bowing. And it's quite awkward because the way I just did it there without playing the bottom D, it's very natural to phrase, and I'm glad I played it that way to show you kind of the feeling of it. Now you just need to bring out that same feeling while playing the D. And it's very awkward because, of course, some are up bow, some are down. It's much easier without all those string crossings. So I keep whistling on this second finger. And so my solution to this would be I would be in first position, even though this one is half position. The reason why I was whistling is because my second finger was in kind of the half position. And when it's there and reaching up, there's a high chance that my finger, the fat of the finger, is going to hit the E string. So by thinking that I'm actually in first position and that my second finger can hit this A string very cleanly from above rather than feel like it's reaching up, I feel like that will solve it. So even though this is half position, I'm thinking first position. You see, that solved it right there. So of course it's inevitable when you play louder that the D will just be kind of repetitively loud, but of course you want to try and bring out the melody notes that are actually changing and try to make the D softer, which I could have done a little better there. One of the funnest passages to play here. I take quite an exorbitant amount of time on that bottom bass note. Maybe it's a little too much. Maybe bring it back a little bit, but it's really cool because D minor. That was not the correct harmony. But yeah, so this is really just harmonic. Just think of like a huge organ and just this church service and just this music ringing throughout the hall, and it's just scattered everywhere. That really is the feeling of this, and it's amazing that Bach creates that on the violin, because if I were to play this in a very resonant church, it would sound like that. That's what's so amazing about Bach. He just used all four strings so well here. So gorgeous. All these harmonies. You know, it's quite simple. Just harmonic progressions here. So I would say each measure is a little bit less, right? We reach this climactic D minor, which we start out in G minor. So we're in the minor 5 again. A little less. A new key, but maybe a little less. Bringing that four-note grouping of bringing out grouping is so important Because in these grand gestures like this, if you just play it very straight, it's beautiful if it's well played, but I like to bring out these overwhelming gestures. So much fun playing all these harmonies. So beautiful. So here is the classic play it once loud and then second part echo. And I struggled with the bow stroke for a long time with this section because I would play the first part loud because it's similar to, just very détaché. But then I would struggle to get the echo to be kind of off the string. So you really have to kind of lift up if you really want to make it off the string. With something like this, if you're gonna do an echo, then really bring it out, right? Don't shy away from it, because if you kind of have to do an echo, it's a little fake and it doesn't have the same effect. But even though it's very obvious you should do an echo here, I would do an echo and really bring it out, and just don't be shy about it. So one way to even bring out the echo even more is doing the détaché with a flat bow hair. So and of course it's really hard to transition into the side of the bow hair for the spiccato, but that would make an even larger difference. And in general, flat bow hair versus side of the bow hairs has been something I've been thinking about recently as well. And that actually changes the sound a lot in terms of just your basic sound. Of course, you've got pressure, bow speed, and contact point, but then there's also the angle. And generally, when you play with flat hair, it's a very full sound, right? Because the hair is completely contacting a string and pulling it, and there's all these hairs that are dragging the string across and vibrating it. With on the side bow hair, it's more nuanced, I would say. And it's a sort of smoother landing, I would say. You can play a lot around with the lighter articulations more when you play on the side. That's why a lot of orchestra excerpts you want to play kind of on the side. Although I had one teacher tell me that they would play flat bow hair, and that really helped them bounce the bow. And so your mileage will vary. Everyone's bow technique is different depending on the bow too. And it is true, when you're doing ricochet, you do want the bow to be flat to allow the bow to bounce, right? Because, when we jump, we want to land on the base of our foot. We don't want to land on the side of the foot, or else we're not stable. So yeah, there's many different ways to approach this, but generally speaking, I would try to be one good thing that can help you play off the string better and feel more comfortable, because it's kind of uncomfortable when you first start, is actually air bowing. This is something my old teacher Gerardo Ribeiro talked about a lot as well, but Doing that, it looks a little funny, and it's actually harder to do that compared to playing on the string, because when you're on the string, you have actually a surface to rebound off of, and it's kind of like having someone to talk to rather than talking alone like I'm doing right now. It's a little bit easier to control, but if you're able to control the bow without anything, then that means you really have full control. And I thought maybe I just use this passage to demonstrate why I don't play with such a low elbow anymore. Because in a passage like this, I'm not really able to control the lift there, right? If I'm so low, then I would only be able to use the natural bounce of the bow, kind of. And I wouldn't be able to control the upper, higher frequencies resonance of the instrument, right? Because I would just kind of leave it up to the bow bouncing naturally. But this way, I have much more finer control of the entire range of the bow, right? Because the bow is a stick here. We should be able to control the full range, whether it's pronating here, coming upwards with the arm, forearm, or if it's down here, really sinking in. Of course, when we're sinking in, there's not really a lot of room to come up, right? Your only way of lifting up is by lifting up your forearm. But your bass sound is very much into the string, right? But if you're up here, then you have so much more room to play around with this height. So that's why I think playing with a higher elbow gives you a lot more capability to express in the way that you want to express. I'm not saying you have to play with a high elbow all the time, but I'm saying why not experiment with it, right? Why not experiment with different bow groups, different ways of approaching the string? Because there really is an infinite amount of ways you can approach every string and every bow stroke on the violin. Same thing, harken back to the first movement ending. The syncopated bowing, I would do that here. Yeah, we're really going to big depths of sound here because we are in 4-note territory here. And I think this is the first time we reach 4-note territory in this movement. So it's really a big gesture. Yeah, maybe the reason why the G minor fugue is so deep and rich is because the G string you play so often. I mean, you play the G 4 times here in a row. So the G just naturally vibrates and resonates so much on the violin. It's such a deep color. Compared to the A feels like there's more nuance to the sound, right? But the G, it's like, it's the lowest note on the violin. So it really brings out so much resonance there. So again, here you can roll to the D string to bring out the melody there. But you can also just hesitate a little bit on the D string to bring it out. This chord in the middle, I think I always roll down. because there's no way you can hear the tail end of that G if you don't roll down. It's impossible. So, yeah, I roll down. Here, I think it's probably possible if I just bring out the D string. On its own there. So I understand again that there's a inclination not to roll down these days, but I just feel like in violin playing and in life in general, there are some rules that we should respect, like not playing here on the violin, but there's certain things that, you know, there's interpretation and there's different ways of approaching. And so I don't think you should lock yourself into doing, okay, I'm never going to roll down, so I'm always going to just bring out the bass note by rolling up. Right? There are certain circumstances where it's necessary to roll down. And so I just feel like you're really boxing yourself in if you just say, I'm never going to do this ever. And I feel like there is reasoning for that, but there's just so many different people in the world and people see things differently. And even if you have a very good reasoning for doing something the way that you do, I think it doesn't hurt to experiment and at least be open to trying something else. Yeah, a lot of 3-note chords there. I just try to vary it as much as possible. You know, it's a string of 5 3-note chords here. You know, it's so many. It's 6 of them actually. So, you know, some of them I do 1 plus 2. Some of them I do 2 and 2. Some of them I do 2 plus 1. Right? So just be creative. You should react to the harmonies, to the melody, and roll your chord based off of how you react to the melody. And don't just say, okay, I'm only going to roll 2 plus 1 every single time. I mean, you really made the point that you can do 1 plus 2, well, and you really brought out the bass line, but what did you sacrifice? Well, you sacrificed variety of articulation, right? These 3-note chords, they're interesting because, and that's the beauty of it, despite this movement being so technically difficult. The beauty of playing the violin is how you go between the bottom to the top notes. There's so much variety there, right? When you play on the piano, when you play a chord, of course the piano can play lots more notes, and of course it can roll too. But generally, you just press down, right? But on the violin, you can go wam, you can go wam, you can go wah, right? I can press down quickly, have a sharp attack, but then lighten up as well. You can't do that on the piano, right? Because when you press down, you can't control the middle of the note at all on the piano. So again, the chords and fugues being the most difficult part about it, you can turn that into the most beautiful part in using a variety of articulations. And so just not being stuck, I think, is so important when it comes to playing the violin. Finally, we restart here. this is a sort of very rustic B flat major section that we've reached. And yeah, these 4-note chords kind of come out of nowhere. I guess it's not too surprising because we have already established we're in 4-note territory now, so Bach isn't afraid. And yeah, just try to use the bow speed to phrase. So that you accelerate, so you lead to the melody. Interestingly, he doesn't write, actually, the last chord there is actually a 3-note chord. So yeah, be careful you don't hit the bottom chord there. I think it's kind of popular to do that either by accident or not even knowing. But yeah, so he takes out a voice. Well, yeah, the tenor voice, the D string, goes away because actually the bass line, I guess he wanted to do that because he wanted to show the upwards motion of the bass line. So yeah, that's important there. You would not want to do, even if it might sound more virtuosic because there's more notes. Another simple progression. I love these progressions in Bach. They're just so satisfying to play. Another descending bass line here, even though the melody is on the A string. But the bass line yeah, bringing out the bass line while also bringing out the top note. That's going to affect the way I use my bow there. I really dig quite into the string. This chord is a little awkward. Another tritone there. My thumb comes up a little bit there. Here we actually go from 3-note chord to 4-note chord, and that's pretty satisfying. The bass goes down. So come up with your arm, right? To hit the bottom G. If you play with a low elbow, you don't really need to come up because you can reach to the G string from this elbow height if you really wanted to, because you're using the forearm, which I think is more common nowadays. People play with the lower elbow, like I talked about in the posture video. Here we're reaching up, right? So bring that out. Yeah, here I do kind of a large break, but I probably wouldn't do so much now again, because it sounds kind of like the end of the piece. If you... I mean, yeah, that doesn't really make sense rhythmically, so I wouldn't do that now. But it is the start of a new section, and I do start the piano new section from the 2nd 16th note. Not... Although I suppose it could work, but I think the tradition is... So something like this, it's tricky because you need the weight on the G string. But then you need to quickly transition to a light A string stroke and kind of more above the string. So I would, how am I going to find that change from there, from the deep G string without taking too much time? So it's tricky there. So in an instance like this, I actually will use a lower elbow height for the G string than the A string, despite the G string being the higher string, because I want the depth in the G string. Right, because if I wanted to play soft on the G string, I would be higher. But since I want to dig, I'm actually, in fact, it's almost like the same elbow height. It's just, in fact, I think my elbow is mostly the same actually. So I'm really just using weight on the G string. On the G string to get there. So that's something to note, right? Exactly what elbow height you're using based on the sound that you want to create in the music. Okay, so the next section is this sort of oscillation section, and it's actually written out. So yeah, I would probably not go there because it's maybe too similar to this section. I don't know. Yeah, he wrote it out here, so maybe to contrast more, I wouldn't do it back there. That's another reason, maybe. Again, when we have a note that's repeating, we want to bring out the changing notes. So I like to bring out these sudden jumps up, and I kind of group it that way, right? So I go rather than just playing it straight. You know, and you need time again to reach up to the new note on the new string. So naturally you want to take time, and that is the start of the new harmony. So naturally I do it there. It's good to take time again, but if you do it all the time, it just doesn't make sense. So some of them I might do with more timing. Others I might take less time, but I might change the color or contact of the bow. This is a stepwise motion upwards. So again, just the natural contour there is very apparent. Same idea, same section here. I'm gonna do the echo, so I might as well accentuate the off the string lightness. This part needs a little bit of vibrato, I feel. If you do it without vibrato, it sounds very bland. Even in the piano echo, I would do a little bit of vibrato. Apologies there. Here I've seen people do third position. That could certainly work. It's easier on the hand. I would probably stay in first position just to keep the natural rolling of A to E, D to E strings, but I could see it working there. Yeah, either way, third finger needs to be more on point and prepared. This is a little bit of an awkward jump. You kind of need to let your wrist come out a little bit to make that. So I think the third position finger would probably be better. Either way, it's hard to play in tune. These sections are surprisingly hard to play in tune. I have a very large hand, but I have very thin fingertips. They've gotten thicker as I've played violin, and naturally violinists, they develop calluses, but also more kind of fat at the tip of their fingers compared to my right hand through years of playing. But still, because my hand is so large, there's a lot of mass there. And so my fingers are so pointed. And if you imagine like a large object, but it's trying to press into little points, and it's got these like really skinny fingertips that can really kind of go everywhere. Because some of my friends, they have large hands, but they have fatter fingertips. So the ratio makes more sense because it's bigger, but when you press down, it's like more surface area and more kind of potential that it will hit the note. I'm not saying it's easier to play in tune if you have larger hands, but I feel like it's just like you plop the finger down and it's just there. You don't have to think so much. But for me, I need to be very careful. That's why I talk so much about hand positions, and in particular if you're doing high 2, low 2, high 3, whatever, because for my hand, if I don't really accentuate those differences, particularly with the third finger, you noticed, sometimes it doesn't press all the way down. I think it has to do with because my fingers are narrow. And so if I don't press down very firmly in the correct position, it's not going to sound. And so, yeah. But, I'm a big guy, and so my large structures are very much in place. My hand frame, it's very solid, but within that I have a lot of, my fingers are long and they're quick, but they need to be very precise. And yeah, so a little side tangent about that, but I think it applies here because your fingers need to be very firmly planted down and you need to know exactly what your intonation is. Okay, I will just skip on to the next section. Okay, so this is really getting to concluding territory for this behemoth of a piece. I know it's not the longest, but we've gone through so much already till this point. So at this point, I think when you're playing the fugue, you're doing a lot of similar things that you had done already. I mean, this, two-note gesture you had already done, and, three-note chords. It's just kind of more of that, It's nothing new, I guess you could say. It's all stuff that we've done before. I think in what I just did, it was good. I like the chords, but I could do a little bit more with vibrato, particularly because the top theme here is not repetitive, but if you use vibrato, it will spice it up a little bit. Particularly on the third note, right? It's so easy to forget when you have 4 other chords that you have to account for. It gets really crazy here. So yeah, just don't forget about the top vibrato. And yeah, the chords, it just gets really insane here. But by this point, you're really just going all out. So it should kind of just happen at this point. Here, even though it's kind of dissonant, I think it's kind of coming down, right? From kind of coming down, so make sure that you come down because it's going to get crazier. This is the diminished chord here for 1 full bar. Again, this high A, it's really a statement. It's not just, you know, that is a very high note there. So the harmony naturally progresses to G minor, 1/6 chord. This is such an interesting harmony in my opinion. And it probably sounds interesting because you're playing the top A string note is actually 1 note above the D string. So that's a little interesting. So I'll probably do 3 notes at once to avoid that kind of awkward sound there. And then we go to 4-note territory. So yeah, this is just build up, make sure that you pace it, right? Sorry. Right, I would say this high B flat is really the climax. You're going to all the way from this. Here, it's just going all out. So in this section, I mean, of course, phrase, but you're just going virtuosic and going crazy. Just don't be afraid. This is only Bach can write something like this. I mean, who has wrote 4-note chords like this and just created such an overwhelming structure? I mean, in a hall, these chords will just be ringing for so long, and then you've got this theme just scattered inside, and it just, from where we've come from the beginning, you know, such a simple melody. We start from nothing until you know, we're just absolutely going everywhere at this point. Yeah, little tricky ups here. With the double stops, I'm not sure. Certainly possible. So again, you have to be careful there if you're going to do ups. I didn't talk about this, but up bow chords, 3-note chords, they're tricky because you're fighting against gravity. Because down bow, you naturally come down. Up bow, yes, you come down, but you're at the tip. And there is strength there, but there's less strength than here. So you have to actually use more effort. So you just want to make sure you come down. But they're actually kind of natural because, again, coming to you on up bow, it is kind of, at least for me, it's quite natural. Down bows, it feels like you're kind of sending out the sound a little bit. Up bow, kind of coming more towards you because physically you literally are doing that. So just try to make sure you can do down bow, up bow chords. Doesn't matter if it's up or down bow, it can sound the same. So you want to practice the chords like that. And so I should have talked about it when you're doing the, you know, those 3-note chords there. But it should sound exactly the same. So the key is that you're coming from above. You're lifting, sending the sound out, and you're lifting up there. I didn't do it now, but I think I do this bowing. There, just because it's really accentuating. This 16th note passage here, I think, is essentially the end of the piece, right? This is sort of wrapping up. The piece could almost end right there. But Bach, of course, in his dramatic fashion and his love for these prelude 16th note sections, you can imagine like his love for those types of sections here. He just has to include one at the end because, yeah, it's not just chords. This goes through 16th notes. It's got everything packed into this one short movement. So yeah, I almost like to fake out the audience, like. Yeah, just really rich. I mean, these are basic G minor harmonies, but this is really the climax. This is the coda of the piece. And one thing I just thought about as what I was doing there, to add a little bit of life in the vibrato. If you watch Joseph Szigeti play, he's got these crazy fingers. He's got super long fingers. He's super tall. He's taller than me. And if you see his third finger in particular, it's like constantly doing this. It's collapsing at the first joint. And he does that with his third finger vibrato. But this type of vibrato you would use in a section like this, where you just need a little bit of life, so it's not completely. So when I put the third finger down, for example, there, I've got it in this kind of, my wrist is a little flat and my fingers are kind of, they're really positioned to do this. And that's okay in this section because it's, going all out, and I want more pad and fat in the sound. So I would do that. Yeah, I was using a lot of the third finger vibrato there. So I kind of sped up a little bit because this is kind of a long section. So rubato, I take time in the beginning. I speed up in the middle so that I can stop and slow down in the end to create dramatic fashion. I played that wrong, but yes, he's creating this huge dramatic 5 chord all the way from here. I mean, really from here. This 32nd note, actually 64th note figure here, he did not use ever earlier in the piece. So this is like very virtuosic. I mean, this is like Paganini molto perpetuo type of virtuosity here. So he's just letting you know that he's just going all out. I mean, this is like an organ just going crazy, So just don't shy away from the virtuosity whatsoever. Better control throughout the bow there to not let it squeak the sound. So yeah, this 5 chord. The last chord, I mean, if I want the biggest effect, I would do 2 and 2. But the problem with 2 and 2 is, yes, you can save bow on, but yes, it's easy to spend too much bow on the bottom note, and it is kind of a long chord. Although I'm looking at it and there is no fermata on the chord, it's actually after. So actually, maybe it's not too long. But in any case, I guess I just would like to accentuate the fact that we're back home in G minor. And so I bring out the first note a little bit. So it's kind of complicated. I mean, the first note is very loud. I play the D string and then I cross, lighten the pressure on the cross. And then I play the 2 strings together at the same time. So don't want to whip the end of the bow there though. Just allow the sound to ring and end, and imagine the sound is still going till the very end, even after you stop. So this was a very long journey, and I just covered and taught myself during the process and went through a lot of details on this fugue. And it's so wonderful because I've been playing this fugue for over 10 years and still I'm learning new things, and that's just the beauty about it. And yeah, so every movement of this sonata is so unique, That's what's so amazing. I mean, I think in the partitas, there's movements that are kind of more similar to each other, and so they kind of blend together a little bit more. But this is just a complete diversion from all the other movements. And so, yeah, thank you, Bach, for writing such amazing music. I think this is really the most rustic out of all the fugues, actually. The A minor is just different, and the C major, very virtuosic, but minor, G minor, is so heartfelt. So that was the journey on this fugue, and I will see you in the Sarabande.